Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to start watching 90 Day Fiancé Season 8, Episode 1. As I always say, never use these videos or any other video on YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You deserve it. The other thing I always say is everything I'm reacting to, everything I'm saying, all the commentary is completely speculative, based on very little information. If I were to actually assess people, I would have them in my office. They would tell me about their inner life, and I would be able to assess them over weeks, months, years, and only then can I really conceptualize someone accurately. So take everything I say with that in mind. We just don't really know the real people unless we actually were able to sit down and talk with them. But we can use the show as a jumping off point to learn about ourselves, to learn about relationships, to learn about emotions, learn about trauma, learn about attachment theory. Let's watch the show. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's get to the show and see if anything of interest comes out of my face.
I can't believe we're going to be living in the same country together. I've never been more ready. I've never been more excited.
Bran?
Yeah?
Are you about wrapping things up?
I'm working on it.
We need to be gone in like the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Just like hurry up.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Let's go.
Let's go. Hurry.
We gotta roll, guys.
Hopefully we won't have any traffic. It's like a 2.5-hour drive as it is. Come on.
I'm working on it.
No pressure or anything.
All right, a little bit more evidence that he has a general vibe of irresponsibility. Who knows? Maybe he's in the right to take his time. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's frequently late or he's frequently dragging his feet as he goes out the door, which sucks the mom in to overfunction because she is worried about him and will, in the process, make him feel like he doesn't matter and that he's generally incompetent, and then he doesn't have self-esteem and doesn't have the headspace to think for himself, and then he continues to be irresponsible, which sucks the mom in, and it just goes round and round and round. I don't know, but I'm just speculating based on the little bit that we're seeing here.
I really love my parents. We're close. We really get along. But I don't think my fiance and I should be living there and just, adding another person to the mix. I am my mom's only child. My dad's been married a few times, and I have one half-brother and 3 half-sisters, and they're all older than me. I never lived with any of my siblings, so it was like, it was 100% like being an only child. It's really always just been the 3 of us.
All right, so we just learned a little bit more about them, that he is the only child for her, for the mom. And so maybe that's a factor in their enmeshment, which I'm speculating about, that for the mom, her relationship with her only child is very, very important to her, which there's nothing wrong with. How do you navigate that through the lifespan is a question, right, that they seem to be asking right now.
Hello? Well, thank you, doctor, for calling me back. Yes, my son's fiancé is coming into town. One of the things that we're concerned about is she has not been on any form of birth control. And they really are not planning on starting a family just yet.
My God, if I'm understanding this situation right. So the mom asked questions that I'm guessing Brandon didn't want to talk about with his mom around Julia's birth control. So before they even meet Julia, she is already invading their lives. Now, on the other hand, given the way that he came across, and by extension, Julia, they both seem, from the way Brandon answered the questions, he seems to be completely oblivious to family planning and the consequences to having a child. And it would raise concern from the parents and also lead the parents to believe that they have to take control, otherwise something terrible is going to happen. So the parents aren't completely out of line. Now, there's a better way to navigate this, I would imagine, because this is likely to alienate him. Brandon's going to be like, wow, my mom's calling her doctor to talk about my fiance's reproductive life? Did you ask for permission? I don't think Julia wants to talk about that stuff with you. It's none of your business. But you see that Brandon is hearing this conversation, he's not doing anything. And you just have to wonder, like, if the mom had someone to talk to about this, if she was talking, and I've talked with parents who have had this exact problem, and they will come to me, and often what happens actually is they will try to get Brandon to come into therapy with me because they're like, something's wrong with our son. He's a grown man and he's still like a child. And he won't want to come to therapy. And then the mom will say, but he won't come. And I'll give an option of like, well, there's a lot you and I can do because it sounds like you want something to change. And you and I can do a lot of discussion around various different things that you can do from your side that can help. So the mom comes into therapy and we review the situation. I build a relationship with her because there's going to be some conflict between me and her, or some suggestions that I have for her that she's not going to like. So I have to make sure that we have a strong relationship. And then I will probably say something along the lines of, well, I get why you want to step in on your son's life. I see why you believe you have to, but let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture here, and let's see, like, what is the end goal? I'm guessing and I would ask her, and usually moms in a situation like this will say, well, I want him to be happy and I want him to be independent. I want him to build a happy life with Julia or whoever he decides to be with, but I also want him to make good choices and stay out of trouble. I'd be like, okay, makes sense. That's why you step in and control things, right? Well, yeah, because he's so irresponsible. Okay. Well, if you continually step in for him, it doesn't give him a chance in his psychology to actually take on the mantle of an adult. And I see this all the time. When you give a 15-year-old responsibility, there's usually a phase of time where they make a lot of terrible mistakes, but they will rise to the occasion. Most people do. So it's different phases and steps along the way, right? If, for example, just as a micro example, you want your kid to drive himself to school or to work, and you don't want to have to drive him anywhere. Well, he has to get a license. And then let's say, because he's such a terrible driver and he's so irresponsible, you always demand that you sit in the driver's seat and watch him drive and comment on every single thing that he does while he's driving. Now, it makes rational sense because when he just gets his license, he's not a very good driver. He doesn't have experience. He's a child. He's 16. He's not making good choices in general. And so makes sense that you have to be there constantly barking at him. Well, what this does is it basically turns off certain functions of the brain of just like, well, my responsibility center is outside. It's sort of like when today with Wikipedia, none of us have to remember anything anymore. And so whenever we want to know something, we just search for it online. And so we don't dedicate things to memory because we know right away we can just look something up. And that doesn't mean we forget things, but it means that we now rely almost on a cybernetic memory system, whereas in the past we would have to figure out some other system, like we'd have to write it down or we'd have to really dedicate it to memory. And when you, as a child, go through life, 16 all the way up to 27, and you constantly have this outside force that is telling you how to be responsible, the part of your brain that is involved in thinking responsibly for yourself, meaning you have to consider the urges you have to consider what would happen in the future, you have to predict how bad it would feel to have something bad happen in the future and sort of transport yourself into the future and come back to the present and think, okay, what do I need to do to avoid that bad consequence? Like there's a lot of brain power involved in that. In fact, it's one of the few things that humans do really well compared to other animals. And if you're constantly doing that for a child and they've literally never had the space to develop that neuronal process for themselves, then they might act like this. And you've created a monster. You've created a 27-year-old irresponsible monster who wants to be on his own because he wants to, but doesn't even know that he doesn't have the responsibility center of his brain. I'm making a lot of speculations, but there are some red flags of this.
And so one of the things that I'd like to do is let her come in and maybe speak with you.
My mom's on the phone with a gynecologist right now. I did not expect this at all. She can call whoever she wants to. She can talk to him. Is that going to change anything? No. She can't make Julia's decision for her.
I just think that they need to be on some kind of birth control. You know, it is something that we'd rather see her go on sooner than later.
And the thing to remember here is she knows she's being filmed and she's okay with this kind of behavior. I mean, that really tells you something, right? That her idea of what is acceptable parenting of your adult 27-year-old son and his fiancé, her idea of what is normal way of behaving is pretty far off the norm. As I always say, there is nothing wrong with the mom being worried. Given the way he responded to the birth control thing, she should be worried. She should be deeply worried. The way he responded to those questions, he seemed completely out of his element. He was treating it like it was some minor thing. And so who knows? Maybe he's very responsible, but the way he responded even kicked the father into the situation. Like, wait, what, son? What's happening? And so there's nothing wrong with her feelings. It's what we do with those feelings so that we can actually have a predicted good result in the end. You know, the thing I would talk with her about is like, okay, yeah, he seems to be irresponsible about family planning. Okay, so you could take over and control, and you could reduce the risk of them getting pregnant outside of when they want to get pregnant. You could probably do that. You could exhibit, but at what cost? One, you could completely ruin your relationship with your son. You could completely ruin your relationship with Julia. You could completely ruin their relationship. You could also just perpetuate the child monster that you've created and never give him a chance to think on his own. So, there's a lot of consequences that we have to weigh against the way you think and behave. Anyway, let's continue watching. But before we go on, I'd never just stop there, because if I just do that with women, with mothers and fathers in situations like this, I'm basically just telling them to stop it, which is really just a simplistic way of looking at things. What I would spend maybe 90% of my time on was, how are we going to transition your attachment and your love and your connection with your son from a teenage version to an adult version? There's a teenage version of your love and attachment and involvement in your child's life. And when your 16-year-old was making bad choices, you stepped in because you're a loving, wonderful mother who has responsibility and cares. There are a lot of parents out there who don't pay attention and they don't get involved, and you were when he was a teenager. That's great. He's 27 now. So he has needs that are different than they were when he was a teenager. And you want him to have a happy life. You want him to get his needs met. So we're going to have to create a new relationship that is just as close, if not closer, because you don't have to necessarily tell him what to do all the time. You could just spend all your time bonding with him. And it's that replacement piece. You don't just take something away. You always replace. You're like Indiana Jones with the sack of sand with the idol. You're just like, okay, idle sand. It's like, okay, I'm going to take away the control, but we're going to replace it with something of equal or greater value. Now we all know what happened in that scene. The thing goes down and the ball comes rolling down. Anyway, let's continue watching.
It is just easier just to ignore this because nothing is going to come from it that I believe. I'm kind of just hoping it'll go away.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for calling me. I really appreciate it. Bye. That was the doctor's office, in case you hadn't heard, and
So we'll see what he says here. This is important. If he exhibits either irresponsibility, then that just validates her efforts to control. If he placates and doesn't push back, then that validates her approach. So let's see what Brandon does.
I'm really excited. The fact that they're going to help out and give Julia a consultation as to,
her
options for birth control.
That's excellent.
That makes me feel much better.
It'll make you feel a lot better too, Brandon. Trust me.
Oh, little boy's in the back playing on his little game.
So you see that? He's not even responding. He clearly has feelings about it. He's playing a game, and the mom is now infantilizing him, making him, oh, he's playing a little game. He's a boy. Yeesh. This is an interesting family to watch. We've seen I've watched other families, Nicole and her mom come to mind, but we didn't get this much data. I mean, this is just the first episode, and there's just so much family system data to watch. And without a family therapist, I can't see this going well, but we'll watch.
Hopefully she'll be happy when she gets here. And as hard as you guys have worked to get her here, I've never seen you so happy with somebody. So, hopefully that part of your relationship will continue and the other part will subside.
Yeah. I've had to go through a lot of hoops. We both have, but I've been putting a lot of money into tickets for her to fly to these places to see me, to pay for the K-1 visa process.
So we can add that to the irresponsible data. Who knows how we would see it if we actually were to talk with him. But I don't know if I showed this clip earlier, but he was talking about how the reason why they have to live with the parents is because he doesn't have any money and he's in a lot of debt. The reason why he's in a lot of debt is because he charged all these really expensive trips to his credit cards, paying for both Julia and him to meet in various different countries in Europe. And that would add to this irresponsible side of him, which is digging himself into a hole and not thinking about the consequences of what would happen down the line. Now, maybe for him, he's just like, no, I knew those consequences and I'm fine with it. But who knows? The other thing I'll say is that there's a possibility that if I were to assess this family more in detail, that the nature of the relationship between the mom and him is actually across the abuse threshold, if you will, where the mom is extremely controlling and emotionally abusive to him. I've been talking about how he kind of participates in the relationship and that he doesn't exhibit responsibility so that the mom can relax. The mom is taking on all the responsibility, and he at least gives this vibe of complete lack of responsibility, at least what they're showing us on the TV show. And I'm framing it as like they're both participating in it. But there's also a chance that if I were to talk with him and really get into his life and see the way they interact more, and family therapy involves that, is we call them enactments, where you actually hope that the family enacts their structure, and then you can assess like the way that they are in the real world. Anyway, if it's possible that what I would see would be extreme emotional invasion and abuse on him, such that right now, for example, she called a gynecologist, he doesn't like it. He could be so filled with fear because he knows that if he indicates any pushback on that to his mom, there will be just like weeks of consequence, weeks of emotional punishment, maybe even physical punishment on him, not now, but when he was younger. So I just want to raise that possibility. I don't want to act like that isn't a possibility. That very much can be. But I don't know. There's no data of that. I would really have to ask them. Maybe we'll find out more as this season goes on.
Biggest thing is I'm putting all my feelings on the line.
What made you propose to Julia after only visiting her 2 times?
There's no shot of her getting a visitor's visa, so it was either go for the K-1 visa or just walk away from this thing. And I said, let's just go down this road, see where it goes. This was really the only option.
So this is alarming as well, in that when you ask him, why did you propose to her? You would hope that they would say, because I'm in love with her and I can't imagine not spending the rest of my life with her. I gave it a lot of thought. I know it was pretty fast, but I've never felt this way before. I'm totally in love. Instead, he just gave kind of a non-answer. He's like, well, it was like kind of that, or else I don't know, like I just thought we should. So this lends itself to another hypothesis that born out of that overfunctioner relationship, and what that results in is that he has what we call dependent personality, which means that he feels very incompetent. He doesn't even know what he really wants. We expect a child not to really know what they want. If you asked a 7-year-old, what career are you going to have? Like, let's say you forced a 7-year-old without any prep. You're just like, choose a career, and they're going to be that career the rest of their life. Now, some kids would be like fireman or astronaut or something, but most kids, at the very least, we would expect them not to really know and to be maybe a little wishy-washy about it, like, I don't know. And if you said, well, you have to choose, they'd be like, well, I don't know how to choose. Okay, I guess I'll just choose that one. And we would expect that out of a 7-year-old, right? Well, when you're kept down developmentally due to being overfunctioned for and invaded in your space in terms of responsibility, never given a chance to develop that brain process of adult-like thinking for yourself, then when you make choices, so you have needs that are coming up, but you don't have the process of figuring out what those needs are and how do I meet those needs. And you just sort of make choices in your life based on what you think you're supposed to do, or even what you think other people think you're supposed to do, instead of really thinking, what do I want and how am I going to get my needs met? What type of person am I in love with? Am I really in love with this person? Am I really ready to get married? What do I want? I hear what other people want, and I have this impulse, but what do I feel comfortable with? And so I wouldn't be surprised, given what we're seeing thus far, that he actually is not in connection with that very much. We've seen other people like this, exhibit behavior like this. We saw Tom and Darcy. Tom was kind of like that. I describe it as sort of a leaf in the wind experience of just like you're just pushed around by whatever force is happening around you. And it could have been that Julia was really pushing for it, and he was just like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do it. Instead of, do I want to? Am I in love? Is this the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? Another possibility is that he is trying to get out of his mother's control. And this very strong woman comes his way in Julia. Julia sounds like, he describes her as Jekyll and Hyde, but it sounds like Julia is very assertive about herself. Who knows what we'll see, but it could be that for him, he is like, oh, okay, well, this very strong personality will save me from my mom. She'll pull me away and save me. But of course, what could very well happen is he will just replace his mom with Julia. Who knows? There's no way to know at this point. But I personally, through the lens of this TV show, am seeing a lot of red flags. As I always say, it's all total speculation. The cast members know they're being filmed. The producers absolutely edit it to say a particular story. So who knows what I would see if I actually assessed them. But I wonder about all those things. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.